Our last startup this morning is Bountiful, and to introduce Bountiful, we have Rob Trice from the Mixing Bowl. Rob, take it away.
Thanks, Nick, and I'm pleased to introduce Megan from Bountiful. She's a remarkable woman with a remarkable story and a remarkable company. And we at Better Food Ventures first got introduced to her back in we invested in 2016, before she got into Y Combinator, before she had the big data sets, before she got some seed capital from some pretty well-known VCs, before she had rebranded from Vinsight to Bountiful to really focus on a number of crops, to really focus on the almond opportunity. And before she'd expanded her product from a yield predictor to a marketplace to a sustainability calculator, and before she got a bunch of big customers paying for that. And I'll leave it there and let her tell the story. So Megan.
Thank you very much, Rob. So I will share my screen. Give me a second here. Ooh. There we go. Cool. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Nunes, and thank you, Rob, for the wonderful introduction. I'd also like to thank Howard and the Bonnie Doon team for including Bountiful and inviting us to participate this year. I'm looking forward to sharing our company and what I've built these last few years with you all, and looking forward to our discussions next week when we get the opportunity to meet in person. So I'm Megan Nunes. I'm the founder and CEO of Bountiful. I was born and raised in the Central Valley of California. I'm from a farming family. I also happen to be a first-generation American, studied in the College of Agriculture at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and I spent a decade working in aerospace and remote sensing. So much of the problems that we're looking to solve at Bountiful leverage a hybrid approach of my kind of interesting background, if you will, taking into consideration the limitation of satellite imagery data, how it's been used, and the ways in which that it can be used to solve various problems within the agriculture sector. And I've been spending my time looking for a use case and focusing energy and efforts to solve for that. So Bountiful is bringing transparency to gray market crops. We view gray market crops as those that are like almonds, grapes, walnuts, and pistachios. Essentially, these are crop types that are all sold in a future-like manner, much like corn, wheat, and soy is on the CME. However, there is no data that supports essentially the storytelling process of what is happening, whether it be in field, in price within the market, and so on. And so Bountiful as a company is an agriculture technology business that's bringing these data-driven tools to the gray market crop sector and to support the entire value chain. So our customers are all the way from the grower ultimately to the buyer, and our tools support each of those members along the way. With our technology platform, our customers are able to farm, market, and buy smarter with actionable forecasting. And as Rob so eloquently shared, we were founded in 2015. We used to be known as Vinsight, and following our Series Seed in 2019, we rebranded the company to Bountiful. And then we had the great pleasure of going through Y Combinator in winter of 17. And today I'm looking forward to kicking off our Series A fundraising here at Bonnie Doon and sharing what we've been up to and the special types of data we've been collecting over these last 6 years, proving out our ability to act as a market maker and to bring both buyer and seller ultimately together to transact. So the problem that we're working to solve, current yield forecasting is all done by hand and generates anywhere from a 20 to 40% error rate in gray market crops. This ultimately causes farmers to lose about $11 billion annually due to bad forecasting. This comes in the sense of pricing, mismatched pricing in the market, or overexpending on input costs as yield and your inputs like fertility and water happen to be linearly related. Bad forecasting drives market instability across the entire value chain, sometimes making it difficult for participants to participate when there's uncertainty within the market due to volatility. That is primarily driven by sentiment because of the fact that there is no data that drives these decision-making processes. And then especially for a year like right now, where growers are having incredibly high input costs due to water and fertility, the need to optimize and efficiently plan for your organization to maximize profitability has never been more critical. And then lastly, we have food companies that have commitments to net zero emission reductions. All of this requires insets from your scope 3 emissions, which ultimately come from the farm. The way to get that data is by measuring what's happening on farm, report that back to the CPG in order for us to kind of close the loop on those commitments and those promises CPG companies are making on behalf of consumers. So for us, the solution, it all comes back to data and yield. Bountiful measures yield productivity at various spatial scales, leveraging data. We are collecting data on a daily, hourly basis from things like satellite imagery, climate and weather data, geographical information. These are things like slope, soil type, location, and then historical yield. We bring this all together within our historical database of over 30 years worth of information. And then we put on top of that the machine learning tools that Bountiful has developed in order to build and understand the relationships of what is causing yield to be X in a given year. Ultimately, we're able to deliver a product that has a performance of 10% error rate or better. And this allows for de-risking of selling and buying of commodities with an accurate yield forecast. It allows for the improvement on on-farm efficiency, where you have the ability to match your water and input needs due to how Bountiful measures productivity so early in the season. It also creates opportunity to sustainably benchmark supply based off of water productivity and emissions, meeting that new need for CPG companies of quality 2.0. And then lastly, Bountiful brings us together in a single, easy to use platform. That's a data-driven platform for the entire value chain within agriculture, market, and community. So here's a screenshot of our agriculture portion of our platform. And essentially it's made of a couple key components that support all decisions related to the farming aspect side of the business. Within weather, prior to Bountiful, you essentially could only track real-time weather, and then you used your gut instinct to benchmark what you thought happened in the past. We now make this ability to where you can track real-time weather and make those comparisons to historical years in order to double check your gut and validate your assumptions that you have going on into the growing season. Within yield forecasting, prior to Bountiful, yield, whether it was for the state of California, a given county, or even your farm, the way that you assessed yield was you go in the field, you literally look around, count how many nuts are here, and then you extrapolate based off of your assessment count. Again, generates 30 to 40% error in trying to assess what your total production output is going to be. We bring this together in a through our machine learning tools and share, here's what yield is going to be, what percent up or down are you over previous years, and what are the key drivers that are impacting yields in order to help support your decision making. Within market, our market tool essentially has been created to be like the Bloomberg terminal for the almond market, if you will. And prior to Bountiful, the way that this data would have been collected is you had to call over 100 different packers and processors and try to basically weed out what is sentiment pricing and what is actual pricing of where business is being done. Bountiful is collecting data from our processor customers around contract price, contract date, the volume that was sold. We then aggregate that information and make it available here for our customers. So the entire industry has transparent pricing for two key commodities within the almond market, showing a low and high grade premium price, as well as things that are happening from a supply and demand standpoint to figure out how is the market tracking in terms of total position sold to, again, help support decision making. And lastly, community. So we are aware that we are in a sentiment-based business, and when you're in a sentiment-based business, it's important to also make sure you're delivering value to that portion and segment of the market. So the coffee shop is our answer to basically merging data and sentiment. Prior to Bountiful, coffee shop talk is something that actually still I'm sure happens today. I know my dad partakes in it often. And basically the purpose here is that we ask questions that relate to things like, are shipments going to increase or decrease this season? The user has to pay to play, if you will, so they need to vote in order to see the results. And then you can see how people's sentiment is changing throughout the year as we continue to move the crop throughout the marketing season and cycle. We also consolidate other key information here, like industry estimates that get released at various points in times throughout the growing season, and news to support all data collection from Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and so on. So that's all in one easy to use place. And finally, our tree nut footprint calculator, which is supporting our marketplace transactions and providing a differentiation. So before Bountiful, the only way that you could essentially assess the footprint of your raw commodity inputs are through tools that are life cycle assessments that are all essentially public data sets that can only measure essentially an almond as being a singular water footprint. And one of the things that we understand at Bountiful is that one of the things that drives water productivity is yield. And so the ability to take what is the water productivity of a given product and further refine and measure it at a county level allows for the buyer to optimize how they would like to meet their water objectives or their emission objectives on a county by county basis. These are things that were not possible before Bountiful leverage the existing data we are collecting from the farm and yield side of our business and are merging them together with the life cycle assessment type tools that allow you to understand and differentiate where your product is coming from, because no almond is the same when it comes to water or emissions. So our traction and how we've grown. In 2021, Bountiful did $1.2 million in revenue. To date, we've done 1.7 million. We're projecting 3 million for the 2022 growing year. We have about 178 industry users. Of that, 10% of our buyers represent the total industry volume for almonds every year. Our farmer users, we have 42 of them. And the farmers that we work with represent about 7% of the total industry acres within the almond market and segment. And we've recently launched our most recent business, which I'm quite excited about, which is our marketplace. And we've done 1 million in gross market value there, where Bountiful is taking a standard 2% rate, take rate, excuse me, and we have 4 million in GMV in our pipeline, where we're currently growing that business with the same customer that we signed the first 1 million with. That ultimately represents a total volume of about 169,000 pounds of almonds sold. So I often get asked, who is our customer and why do people choose Bountiful? Who are you working with? Because we do have quite a unique backlog of customers and those people that are working with us. So the first is ag land investment groups. They love us because we remove risk for them in accessing production, and we give them the actionable data that's needed for investor reporting, all nicely consolidated in a single, easy to grab place. Vertically integrated agriculture operations love us because the ability to leverage a yield forecast early in the season gives you the opportunity to plan efficiently and creates opportunities to maximize profitability. Packers and processors love us because early forecasting allows them to build their market strategy and ultimately remove any personal biases that they may have going into the season. CPG companies love us because our actual market data gives them transparency in procurement, and it allows them to align their sourcing objectives with their current company requirements and needs, whether that be price, whether that be sustainability benchmarking, and so on. And I'm really happy to share that ag retailers are starting to love us. We're presently testing our first reseller relationship with a large ag retailer in the Central Valley that has a special holding footprint within the permanent crop space. A couple key things to note for us is why we view the ag retailer opportunity as a good time now. We've noticed a trend, especially within the permanent crop sector, that the ag retailer is no longer just servicing the grower as a needs to buy inputs, if you will. There's definitely more of a shift to where ag retail is starting to offer value add services to those end users for things like, let me help you with an irrigation schedule. Let me help you assess what your production is going to be this year. And these are all tools that Bountiful has already built and collected and created within our platform. So we give our ag retailers a very easy, ready to go to market strategy and tool in order to provide that value to their customer. So a total look at our addressable market. As far as the almond TAM goes, the average price of almonds is about $2 a pound. California does about 3 billion pounds of almonds, which represents $6 billion in total revenue. They make up 90% or more of the global almond market, come out of California, which is absolutely, every time I see that number, it even surprises me. 300 million pounds of almonds globally. These come from places like Australia, Portugal, and Spain, represent about $600 million of total market value, bringing our TAM to 6.6 billion. And because we do have other market opportunity within the crops that we forecast of walnuts, grapes, and pistachios, there is opportunity for us to further grow our total addressable market. So our ask, today I'm here kicking off our Series A. We're raising $6 million, and the purpose of our Series A funds is to grow our marketplace transactions and to grow our acreage footprint and crop types. We previously raised a $3 million Series Seed in 2019 that was led by Graycroft, and supported by some of our existing investors like Precursor Ventures, Y Combinator, and Better Food Ventures. So with that, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Megan. And looking at your list of customers, we're happy to say that all those will be present in Bonnie Doon next week. So you should have some interesting conversations. And
can't wait.
We're honored that you're choosing Bonnie Doon to kick off your Series A as well.
Thank you.
All right, so any questions from the audience? Sure, we got a few out there.
Megan, it's Shauna Day. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the competitive landscape that you play in?
Yeah. So Bountiful as a company, we have kind of a wide array, if you will, of competitive landscape. And I'm going to break them out into kind of each of the various segments where we see that. So within our marketplace standpoint, competitors that we as a company have would be companies like Produce Pay, or Silo, which is a recently funded marketplace company by A16Z. One thing that is very different about us and those entities is that our focus has really been on permanent crops and tree nut crops, whereas their focus has all primarily been on fresh vegetable, if you will, and kind of more of like the lettuce, the Salinas Valley basket of things. Within sustainability benchmarking, we are definitely, I'd argue, competitors with those that are creating public LCA type aggregated data stories. So those would be people like How Good, for example, would be a nice direct competitor to Bountiful. And then on the market intelligence, if you will, or like the forecasting side of things, competitors that Bountiful have would be companies like Grow Intel, for example. And one unique factor that differentiates Bountiful from each of these entities is that our focus is really on bringing the whole thing together in order to support decision-making across the value chain, rather than silo these businesses out into individual solutions. So we leverage our on-farm data in order to drive value back to the grower, and at the same time use that tool to connect the value chain in a unique way that was not possible before.
Thanks, Megan. That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Megan, this is Howard. I have a question for you if nobody else has. So on the marketplace side of your business, as we all know, it is always hard to build a marketplace because you have to build demand and supply at the same time.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about your strategy for how that works.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that's quite interesting about our market is that the buyer is very hungry for information and transparency. And one thing that you'll notice is that, like, presently, our buyers represent are the stronger balance, if you will, than where the farm customers that we as a company have. One of the things that we have focused on early on, as far as the types of customers we brought on board to access our market making information, has been who are the users that are high volume buyers within the almond market, are interested in seeing sustainable supply, and collectively, by bringing these people together, have the ability to push liquidity in that way. And we've been able to do that by partnering with some of the largest CPG companies that are buying almonds, whether that be domestically or even abroad, many of whom are aligned around this idea of bringing a sustainable benchmarked almond to market, which is helping drive the necessary liquidity growth that we as a company need in order to kind of get that flywheel started of that fine match, if you will, between buyer and seller. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Great. We have time. We're just out of time, but if anyone has more they'd like to sneak in, I'm happy to let them go.
Well, I have one last question, if I can sneak it in. So, there has been a lot of press about how much water the almond industry uses. Is there something about your platform that can help address that issue in terms of differentiating between those that are more efficient users or less, or whatever?
Yeah, so our water productivity tool, I'm going to go back to that. Whoops. So that's the purpose of this tool, essentially, is to highlight, if you will, the difference of water use. So on average, they say like an almond uses anywhere from like 2 to 3 gallons of water per pound of almonds. Now that is like true as potentially as an average and looking at the whole state, but yield is very highly variable in the state of California, and it differs depending upon where you source from. So On the graph that says water and emissions, where you see the red and green bars that are stacked on top of each other, the purple dot that's all the way at the bottom represents essentially a highly efficient operation, whereas other entities that have a different volume makeup depending on the counties of where that product is coming from, that purple dot is going to get moved up into the water productivity, potentially into the red, showing that there is a greater use of water to generate an output of product, depending upon where you're sourcing from. So this tool exactly is for that purpose, to highlight those efficiencies that some growers are able to achieve in terms of how they farm, and trying to leverage ways to reward and benefit them, as well as the buyer aligning themselves with water requirements that they have. And this is very important, especially in drought years in particular, and considering that the state of California has entered year 3 effectively of drought. These are conversations I'm having with my customers very frequently right now in order for them to get ahead of those conversations that are going to be coming down the pipeline very soon.
Thank you very much.
All right, great. Well,